about me. My journey with online marketing started started in about 1998. My family moved from India to San Francisco. I was 13 years old, and I discovered a little something called the internet. So I popped in the AOL CD and just kind of got started on it. And one of my big passions at the time was professional wrestling. So I made a website about professional wrestling, and over time it started to get a lot of visitors, and I wasn't sure why. And all of a sudden I had pro wrestlers emailing me about my ranking page where I ranked them every week. And what I realized was Alta Vista had pro wrestling. When you search pro wrestling, my website was ranked number 2. So all of a sudden it went from me having kind of 10, 20 visitors a day to about 10,000 and then 50,000 visitors a day. And I didn't know at the time how to make money from it, but I did not want to get a job while I was in high school, as my parents suggested I should. So I looked around, and now it's easy to kind of monetize your web traffic, but back then you had to actually go out and sell ads on your website. So you'd go to another magazine and say, hey, do you want to place an ad for $200, $300 a month? So that's how I kind of got started. It was much of what I know about marketing is incidentally through pro wrestling. So if I make any pro wrestling jokes, hopefully a couple of you will laugh. And what it has sort of evolved into, and then there are a couple of landmark events that have happened in my lifetime that's changed not just my life, but all of us in this room. The biggest one was the introduction of smartphones, which made it possible for you to have cell phone access at all times, but also for others to track you at all times and know that you're eating here right now. They may not know exactly who you are, but they know that your phone is currently at this restaurant, and they may not know that you're here for an AMA meeting, but they might be able to figure that out if they did enough digging. So I'll kind of go into a little bit of detail about how some of the tracking is done. But in general, we're all marketers here, unless you're in a wrong meeting. So we can look at it in a way where a lot of kind of the general public might find it creepy, but at the end of the day, what Mark Zuckerberg said to the senators was, why is Facebook free? And it's a simple answer is advertising. And a lot of that is because anytime you download an app that's a game, even if it doesn't have an ad, that data on your phone is being shared back with the app developer. If it's not, then you're probably being faced with a lot of pop-up ads. So in either of those situations, at no time in our lives has it been truer that nothing is really free. It's a matter of how much you're willing to trade in terms of your privacy versus getting free services. And there's a lot of kind of euphemisms that can be used to describe that. My favorite one is to collect your data for a more personalized experience. So that's kind of one way of looking at it as well. But my goal is today to kind of help you guys see what's available in the digital world, and also what to be careful about, what is not really legitimate, what is doable versus what's just pipe dream. Because what happens a lot of times is as an agency, we get clients who come in and say it's an auto dealership. They'll say, we want people who are looking for autos right now, automobiles right now. It's pretty hard to find people who are exactly in market going to a agency. But there's a lot of data providers that will say, oh yes, of course we can do that. And a lot of times we're not thinking through how is that possible. As long as somebody says it convincingly that it can be done, we tend to believe it. So those are kind of things that hopefully I'll be able to cover and give you guys some tools to take back and better search for your data partners, vendors, and agencies. So this is kind of what I'm going to try to cover here. There's types of data, what's available, how to use that data, the data fraud problem, and the last one will be some tools to leave behind with the how to fight data fraud. All right, so the brief history of data. Interestingly, there's a guy named Vin Gupta who started a company named Info Group. What he started doing in Nebraska in the 70s and 80s was he started scanning the white page and yellow page directories long before anybody else did it. And he would scan it and he started putting it on CD-ROMs and hard disks. That was one of the first big data companies that came to be long before internet happened, and he would ship this package out in these big hard drives to large marketing agencies. And I found out about him because when I entered the marketing world, people would ask me if I was related to him. And depending on who was asking, it was either a good thing or a bad thing. So I was non-committal until I understood why they were asking that question. But really the big change has been, back in the day you had these publishers. If you needed a mailing list, you went to them, and you could send a mailing piece to subscribers of Time magazine, for instance. Over time, it's changed where you get these packaged data sets in the 2000s, where you're looking at a little bit more sophisticated data sets as computer capacity grew, where you could combine things. So you could do things, household income, male, female, ethnicity. And where we are now is that there is a lot of information that you could get if you wanted. So one of the fascinating things is the whole controversy about political voter files being leaked or it being found online. The reality is it's really not a big deal if you're working in the political data world, because you can go to the Secretary of State and request that file, and most states will give it to you for less than $100 with people's detailed date of birth information, in some cases driver's license number, and that's all kind of public record that you can acquire, and most people don't realize that. And that's just kind of one of the data sets available. You can look up somebody's, what the house value is according to the state for pretty much any county in the US now. But besides that, you can also, Twitter, for example, has a separate department that licenses anything that you have tweeted since 2005. You can license that in bulk. So there is a lot of information out there, and it's just a matter of now finding what information is useful and what to do with it. That's the bigger challenge now than the lack of data. So if you have your phones handy, this might be a cool exercise to try out, and I believe we'll make this presentation available, so if you don't, but this is, these are just two of the large ad networks. The first one is Google, the second one is Oracle, which owns Blue Kai and a couple of other large ad agencies. But you can actually see what Google knows about you that they're using to target ads about you. And depending on how much you use in terms of your mobile device versus desktop, it may be more interesting to look at one or the other. But I'll give you guys a couple of minutes to see what you can find about yourself, and then I'll show you what they know about me and Patrick as well.
I'm kind of scared. What are you gonna find out? So is this it?
Yep.
So I'm a male?
Yep. All right, so we'll kind of move on to the next slide, but you guys can write down the URLs and look at it later on. So this is what they have about me. More or less kind of true. There's a few things. My son will use my phone sometimes, so it has animation on mine, for instance. But for most part, it's decent. It's not great, but it's decent. And I'll show you what a bad profile looks like, or for somebody who is trying to hide from the world like Patrick, what he can do to stay kind of under the radar. All right, so Patrick has managed to hide himself from the world. I'm not sure how, but this is all Google seems to know about him. So he could be browsing most of the time in private mode, or he could be changing his phones or resetting his phone often. Actually, let's go back real quick on mine. All right, so this one is from Google, and this one is from Oracle, which is, besides being a large software company, they have invested billions of dollars in creating online identity profiles. And more often than not, BlueKai gets it wrong. So you can see they have me marked as female, male, and it has teenagers at home, which is also not true. So just depending on which company you're using, it can go either way. It can be very correct or it can be very wrong. So if you're buying data from BlueKai, I would get selected for both male or female selection. So that's kind of one way of looking at it. There's innocent explanations here where they might be just getting it wrong. Maybe somebody else was using my phone or my computer and searched something that led them to believe it. But they also have hundreds of data providers feeding data to them, and that's where a lot of the data fraud happens, because the more categories they belong in, the more chances are that their data gets used. So it's to their advantage to say this person is both male and female, but at the end of the day, you're losing money if you're targeting, say, a female product directed at me. So. All right, so that was kind of the online profile and persona. The other part of this is data companies also keep separate profiles. My guess is that we probably, for this room, say we probably have 70% of you where we have this type of information. And there's really no way to completely hide from this. So Patrick, a very privacy conscious guy, we already have all of this information about him in Stirista's database, which he was somewhat upset about. So, and a lot of this data comes from what magazines you subscribe to, what websites you may have signed up for, especially if you start thinking about magazines and newspapers. One of the kind of the drawbacks of the advent of internet has been their downfall. So they have to figure out how to make money from their subscriber list. So they have to work with data companies and agencies to share that information. So if you've ever donated money to an animal charity or most nonprofits, you'll find that within a month or two, you start getting direct mail from every charity possible. And the reason is they not only take your money, they also need other avenues to make money, so they share their donor list with other like-minded people as well. So there's kind of a lot of data mingling, co-sharing going on that gives us access to this type of information. Some of the other types of information that's easily available, if you have a little bit of time and some money, you could collect this information for pretty much anybody in this room. IP address, phone app tracking. So this one is kind of interesting. How many of you use Uber? All right, so handful of you, more popular in bigger cities. One of the interesting differences between Uber and Lyft is you can turn off your location tracking on Lyft so that it only turns on if Lyft is active. However, you cannot use your Uber app if you turn off the location tracking when it's silent. So that means even if you have Uber installed on your phone, Uber can see that you're at this restaurant even if you're not using that app, and the background is tracking your location. And that's true for a lot of apps. And so if there's some of you more like Patrick in this room, you can go on your phone in your settings and turn off location tracking on your phone. So that prevents apps from tracking your location, because a lot of the money now is for games, for people who develop free games, for instance. They can sell that information about where you're going, your phone is tracking, back to data companies, and that's kind of a hot commodity right now. So for those of you concerned about that, that's one way to look at it. You can turn off location tracking. Now, one of the key things to keep in mind is a lot of marketing companies, big ad agencies, it's not that they're trying to be creepy and try to find more about you, which they are to target you as part of the group. So for example, if they know I like gardening, it's not that they necessarily know I like gardening, but all they have to know is that my phone is interested in gardening to give them ads targeted at me. So even though it looks like it's a personalized ad that's targeting me, in reality it's part of a bigger group of people, all of whom have a shared hobby of gardening. So, wow, this changes things. All right, so we start off with an audience data. Once you have the audience data, there's 4 primary ways to distribute that data. Largely on the online side, it would be display, Facebook, email, and on the print side, it would be direct mail. A lot of companies now are trying to not just place ads, but are trying to figure out how to make those ads be trackable. So for instance, you walking into a car dealership, it's not just that you're walking into a car dealership, it's also used for attribution to see whether or not the campaign worked and you have walked into a car dealership. So if you're getting a piece of direct mail, and if it's only a direct mail campaign, they can still check to see how many of those people who got direct mail actually came to the car dealership, even if you did not end up buying anything. So it's a kind of a mode for attributing the fact that the direct mail piece caused you to visit the dealership or a location, whatever might be the case. So generally, there is 3 types of campaigns that most of you guys probably run. Reactivating inactive customers, retaining loyal customers, and then acquiring new customers. So the rest of kind of my next 10 minutes, we're going to be primarily focusing on acquiring new customers. That's where most of the fraud happens, because you have a pretty good database of your own customers, or if you don't, that would be something you can control, but it's acquisition where you can't really control what you're doing. So typically, well, today there is about $19 billion in ad fraud going on. So there's a lot of people that are benefiting from either ads not being shown, or ads being shown to the wrong people, or impressions that are being reported that are not accurate. So it's $51 million per day. And it's largely outside. The government does not fully understand the ad industry. As if you guys saw the clips with Mark Zuckerberg, the questions were too basic, too simplistic for them to be able to tackle this problem. So this problem is ongoing and growing, and it's probably in the next 5-10 years, as kind of the next generation of politicians come along that grew up with technology, will start to address this problem. But right now, it's for most part sort of undetected problem. And actually, let's go back one slide, Patrick. One of the biggest things, and it's not just kind of small companies doing it, it's large companies. Newspapers have been busted with falsifying website traffic using bots, because at the end of the day, they get paid by their advertisers on how many people are coming to the website. So, and the bot click farms are very prevalent, easy to set up. And so 28% of website traffic, that's about 1 in 3 people coming to the website. If you for a lot of companies is fake traffic. All right. And yeah, so 30% on the low end, and some other sources will say up to 50% for a lot of bigger websites can be entirely fraudulent traffic, especially for websites that sell ads. And the cost is going to reach about 44 billion. So there's kind of it's an ongoing problem, and one that I think is going to be a hot topic and will get addressed at some point if the marketing organizations don't address it themselves. And one of the challenges with Facebook is you create an ad. It's very easy to use. It's designed so that my dad can go in and create an ad. But the problem is Facebook doesn't reveal how many people are real, what they're doing to fix the problem. But what we do know is that they've deleted 500 million fake accounts just in the first 3 months of 2018. So it's an ongoing process for Facebook, Twitter, and a lot of other social platforms that are trying to get the advertiser confidence back that the ads are being shown to real people and not just millions of fake accounts. And so one of the things kind of to avoid doing this is by figuring out who your target audience is and working with offline data. So that means work with a company that has traditionally done direct mail, that has postal list equivalent. So that way when you can onboard that data into Facebook, and you risk Facebook will theoretically not match onboarded data to a fake account. It's possible there might be a smaller percentage, but at least you're not risking using Facebook demographics where you're not confident whether everyone is a real user or not. And Facebook does not allow this yet, but a lot of the other platforms have started allowing you to use third-party, not only third-party data, but there's third-party companies that do fraud detection and guarantee a certain amount of human traffic on their platforms. All right, the other big thing, if some of you do acquisition email, is it's become kind of a trend. There's even less regulation on the email side. So we've got to the point where companies essentially guarantee marketing success now. So if you Google something like buy clicks or guaranteed open rates, you'll find hundreds of vendors that will tell you, it used to be we'll guarantee 10% opens, but now we have as the competition for fraud has its own kind of a sub-industry now, where people are coming in and guaranteeing not just 10%. We had a lady do a campaign with us that was disappointed with 7% acquisition open rates, and I said, what do you want? What were you expecting? And she said, well, we were expecting at least 35% open rate on an acquisition email. So, and she was very confident, and it's a big New York agency, so it's not like we're dealing with people, the people who have bought into this, they're not just kind of the average low-level marketing manager. It's big agencies. Everybody is looking at these numbers, and we're living at a time where metrics are so important. So, but the metrics people are looking at are wrong metrics. Open and click rates can be easily falsified. So the other thing I'm hesitant about, there's some companies that do a legitimate job with performance-based marketing, but in my experience, a lot of times it'd be like going to a doctor and saying, I'll only pay you if you cure me. If not, I'll not be paying you. But there's a lot of marketing companies that offer that you don't have to pay me anything until I give you a certain number of signups. And a lot of times those companies are able to do that is because they have somebody on the back end falsifying. They have entire teams filling out forms with overseas offices or even U.S. offices where they hire interns to fill out forms. So there's kind of something to watch out for. I usually get a little uneasy when I hear performance-based marketing. There's a couple of decent players out there, but you really want to early on test to see whether or not it's real. Can you reach out to these people? Can you actually convert it into a sale? and get some real sales input on it. How good are these leads that are signing up? And the other part is a lot of, there's kind of, I would say there's amateur fraudsters, and then there is professional fraudsters. Professional fraudsters actually have a dashboard to present to you with fake statistics. They've mastered this as an art form, but in an amateur you can easily find is they usually don't have a dashboard. The reporting is sort of skim. If you do a display campaign and ask them where was the ad placed, they don't really have a good answer. It's on many websites, it's on important websites, premium websites, but not really sharing with you the details. So as a marketer, you guys have the right to ask questions, and I would do a lot of it beforehand, look at sample reporting beforehand, so it's not a big surprise at the end of the day after the campaign. And the last part of this is working with companies, third-party validation companies. That's become more and more important because it's hard to trust people or even agencies now, even big ones. Or you come here, you hear me talk, but if you do your campaigns with Stirista, I seem like a nice guy, but can you really trust me? So I always recommend using third-party tools and asking them, are you comfortable if I use a validation tool to verify the leads that are coming in? And this is going to be my process. Are you going to be comfortable with it? And chances are, most of them, if it's not too taxing on agencies, they will end up doing it. And if they're not willing to let you put your own tracking codes on campaigns, likely it's not going to work out anyway, so something to keep an eye on. All right, so kind of the last issue I'll touch on is how do you check how things are working. So the first and most important is forget about impressions, click rates, all of those things they matter to a certain extent when you're looking at a dashboard, and it's good to have information. But at the end of the day, you should really be looking at conversions, and it's really important that that's how. If you're in marketing and your CEO might be looking at the metrics that are click rates, but to emphasize and discuss what is it that we should be measured against, because a lot of the platforms will also allow you to optimize in terms of different attributes. And at the end of the day, if you're optimizing on impressions, how many impressions you're getting, but if you're not getting enough signups, so for example, you do a digital campaign and you're getting 50% of your clicks from eBay because it's a high click rate there, but if it's zero conversions from there, then that's a real problem, because for most business owners, the real value at the end of the day is how many people they got to sign up, and everything else is sort of nice to have dashboard. So that's my biggest advice to everybody. But the kind of related to that, I'll again emphasize there are companies now that will fill out the forms themselves, so the conversion looks good too. So make sure you have kind of a process on the back end, so you're dealing with those conversions, making sure you're engaging your sales team to check on those leads and follow up with them. And the other part you can do is, especially if you're doing Facebook ads or most of the digital campaigns, if you have an agency that's doing it versus yourself, ask them to give you access. It's all possible. It's very easy to do. Google, Facebook, they're all designed so that you can really dive in and look in details on your own stats. So ask them for access to your own accounts. I'm just surprised at how many people don't have access to it. So if they're trying to change vendors, they can't because they're beholden to that vendor because they have never had direct access to the platform. They might get access to report or Excel sheet once in a while. So having that direct access will give you control. It allows you to log in real time, and also allows you to see the markup in terms of what you're paying versus what the agency is charging. And those are good conversations to have. Obviously, I have children I have to feed, so agencies have to make money. But if you know what the percentage is going in. It's everyone is happy. Otherwise, you get in a situation where it's a surprise that the agency was marking it up 50%, and it becomes a bad relationship, and people become spiteful. So. And yeah, these are some of the, for people who are doing online traffic of any kind, these are just some of the companies that we work with. I would say do your own due diligence, but these are ones that I'm personally familiar with to track kind of your web traffic and see how good the quality of that web traffic is, if you have a bot problem or not. And yeah, so always verify your leads. If you're buying data, ask for a list. Don't ask for just a completely random sample, because the truth is anyone can create any data company or agency can create the perfect list if you just tell them to send 50 records. Instead, kind of give them people that you know, people in your zip code, and maybe the zip code you live in, to see how much information they have about you, what do they know about you, and if you're not there or if the information is wrong. And by the way, like you guys saw with Oracle, which is a huge company, people get data wrong all the time. So it's not about trying to get perfect, but it's about at an aggregate level, you're hoping that 80 to 90% of that information is correct. They're never going to get everything right. So the last thing you want to do is not, if you set the bar too high, you're not going to find any data companies that meet it. But finding something that's a good fit between, all right, I can see why they might have gotten it wrong. So in my case, animation, all right, my son is on the YouTube on my phone, so it makes a lot of sense. Custom landing pages, tracking links, those are freely available. You can do it for free with Google, but always have kind of your own tracking methods as well, besides whatever your vendors are offering you. And when possible, back in the day, most publishers could not or did not want to sell their data. But the difference between kind of a traditional publisher, Time Magazine would never sell you their list, but a data company is in the market of selling lists. So if your business is primarily in San Antonio, you can go to a data company and buy a list for certain zip codes that you keep in-house. That way you can track attribution, you can see who's visiting your website and all sorts of information. But having that data set in-house can go a long way. And data prices have come down quite a bit in the last 3-4 years, which is not good for me, but it's great for marketers in terms of being able to access data. All right, so that concludes the end of my presentation. Thank you. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. You are the one.
One of the biggest things that as marketers, when we're reporting to our CEOs, our boards, one of the things that has always been a pain is how do you know that marketing actually works? And
Sure.
so, of course, we all know that the answer is some exposure engagement you do today. You may not see a result or conversion for 3 to 6 months down the line. Do you think that with this type of data tracking, that window and accuracy is shrinking? Like, are we solving the issue of being able to prove our ROI?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I think we do have a lot more data points available now. But in terms of coming up with KPIs, I think the amount of data available has more than anything kind of confused it. Back in the day, 10 years ago, it would be simple. If it's a political campaign, I want X number of donation. Now there's so many different ways to track engagement, and it could be how many likes you have. So I think the biggest thing would be to find KPIs that work for both the marketer as well as the C-level executives, and having them kind of come up with it in conjunction with you can allow you to set goals for 2019 versus just going off things that may have been done in the past a certain way. But I think it varies drastically for company to company what they're trying to accomplish.
Thank you. Okay, Okay, my question is, thank you. My question is about when you start to work with a third-party data company and you're sourcing them, what questions should you ask to vet them to determine if they're legitimate or not?
Sure, yeah. So where I would start, a lot of times, so sourcing, you'll get generic answers. You should ask them who do they work with, who their clients are, and don't just take their word for it. Ask them, hey, can I talk to references? It's almost like going through an interview process, especially if you haven't worked with them before, it's not a referral. I would ask them, can I talk to a couple of your clients and make sure how the campaign has worked for you. So that's always a good way to do it, asking for, can you share sample data with me? Can you share some success stories? So even if, besides kind of client, they should be able to talk through some of the campaigns they've done. If you're doing creative work with them, what kind of creative have clients used with their data? So that would be a good way to see, all right, has this person actually done campaigns with their data, or are they just a pure data seller? Oh, thank you guys, appreciate it.